Hi, everyone. Welcome to day three of the Caucus Academic Advising Summit. Really excited to see everyone here today for our session. We have today Mitchell Miller and Tabitha Beedle from McGill University, and they're going to be chatting about the really important topic about collaboration between academic and advising leads. So I will turn it over to them. Thanks for being here.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to be here. I know you had an option of sessions to attend. We're glad you came here with us. So as Pearl said, we're gonna talk to you in a session we've entitled Negotiating Collaborative Leadership Between Academic and Advising Leads. As you'll see soon from our slides, the title is a bit of a misnomer, but we'll get to that. And both Tabitha and I are coming to you today from McGill University in the Department of Integrated Studies and Education. McGill University is in a land known as Tujage in the Ganegahaga language, also known as Montreal, a site of meeting between the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. And always on top of thinking about the territory we're on, I try to think about how our work is about decolonization, indigenization. And this is a moment to actually say, we looked at our topic. It wasn't something that was strongly informed by this. You'll see that we do talk about ways of questioning hierarchy and having more relational discussions. But the truth is, and maybe you're familiar with the work of Tuck and Yang, who say don't use decolonization as a metaphor, is this is not a session that is specifically about indigenizing or decolonizing in the way it's meant to be. But perhaps through this session, you think of ways to bring this further and think about those perspectives more. So always want to think about that work, but also not say that we're doing work that we aren't doing in that way. But there might be some elements that you think that you can take from this session today for your own practices and thinking about it from different critical perspectives. So who are we, Tabitha?
Hello, everyone. As introduced, my name is Tabitha Beedle, working here in the Faculty of Education at McGill University. I'm enjoying a wonderful sunny day. We haven't had many of those in Montreal as of recent. A little bit about my background. I work as a student advisor in the department. I originally was in the field of education as a teacher and have moved since to working in post-secondary educational institutions in different student affairs roles. I've worked a little bit in admissions and more recently the past about 3.5, 4 years in a academic advising role here at McGill. My context is working with students across 9 different programs, 2 degrees, and with 2 different program directors. One thing that's really important, in my context and regarding this session is just oftentimes the academic advisor is sometimes the constant with the program. With the institution I work with here, many times our academics are taking on a 2-year role as the program director or a 3-year role as the program director. So it's really important to establish a positive relationship, and when that works well in terms of negotiating sort of leads and things like that, which we'll get into a little bit, but it is nice to have sort of new academic leads, but negotiating those relationships and how it's going to work with each of them can sometimes be a challenge when you have different ways of working and personalities, and sometimes, 2 to 3 years with each academic, which can sometimes roll over. What today is really all about is speaking to what you are good at, knowing your strengths, and the person you're working with leading to their strengths as well, which is something that we work really hard to do here at McGill. Mitchell.
I'm Mitchell Miller. I previously was involved in student affairs and services, so worked a lot with Caucus, and also was a staff member in the Faculty of Education as well, working in student and academic affairs, and then became a faculty member here 3 years ago in one of the programs that Tabitha is an advisor for. So that's when our working relationship started. And so there is this unique element to our working relationship and backgrounds that Tabitha is an academic advisor, but has an academic background in the programs that she advises on. And then I'm a quote unquote academic, but I've been in Tabitha's shoes and worked in student affairs and know that world even from like a process standpoint. But we're not saying that is a requirement to what we're talking about you today. I think it just helped us would develop trust and a good relationship and help surface some of the ideas that we'll talk about in this session. But whatever your familiarity is or your background, whether you're on the academic or advising or something else, I think a lot of this can be taken to heart. But we just do want to admit that, yes, we have this very unique aspect where Tabitha has an academic background and I have an advising background. And she's the advisor and I'm the academic. And as we'll talk about, maybe all of that doesn't matter.
Okay, perfect. A little bit about the agenda today. We're going to be getting an introduction to the frameworks from Mitchell, looking at distributed leadership as well as the joint of continuum effort. We're going to be looking at some examples from our practice and getting your brains working, thinking about how this might apply to your role, but also, where you think some of these tasks and items are following within that joint effort. We're going to be going over some of the strategies for joint effort, how you can continue that within your practice, with the people you work with. We're going to be looking at the end at an interactive exercise, again, sort of having you reflect on your leadership opportunities, your relationships with other staff members, and what that looks like in your context. And then we'll, of course, have some space for questions as well. Before we get into a little bit more about the framework, so we'd like to learn a little bit more about who is with us today. So if you can just take 1 second to fill in what your role is, should be coming up there in terms of whether you're coming to us here as an academic, as an advisor, or maybe you take on a different student affairs role at your institution. Great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. So we've got, not unsurprisingly, we have a large group of advisors, which is wonderful. We've got some other people working in student affairs, and we have an academic joining us as well today. So that's excellent. So definitely applicable to everyone here today in terms of our discussion. So in thinking about this session today, we really were thinking about sort of the challenge. Even when I first got hired here for this position, something that was continuously talked about in my first few months was the importance of working closely with your program director. But it was a little hard to determine what that meant. So there was kind of limited guidance on and protocol on who leads what, how decisions are made and shared, how expertise is recognized, and this could result possibly in inefficiencies in decision making, confusion in roles, and missed opportunities for collaboration. And that's the biggest one, missed opportunities for collaboration, because really what we're all about is trying to promote student success. So if there's areas where we could make things better for not only ourselves and our working relationship, but also for students, we want to make sure that we're in a position to do so and setting ourselves up for that. You're going to see another quick poll come up for you now. And it's just a simple question. Does your department or unit have a written record that clarifies roles, responsibilities, and decision-making in the advisor and academic working relationship? Great. I'll give you another little bit for that. Okay, wonderful. So yeah, about half of you saying no, some of you as well saying you do, which is wonderful, and some people being unsure. But I mean, even just seeing that half being no, is really important, and something that definitely is something that we see as well. So that is great. Okay. So now that we know a little bit more about you and your background and where you're coming from, we're going to jump into the actual areas that we're looking at and the theories that we're going to be discussing today.
So the first one is distributed leadership. So if you've done any amount of leadership studies or looked into different models of leadership, you might be familiar with this one. I looked more into this one when I was completing some studies in educational leadership. And what really appealed to me is that as opposed to what we'll see about collaborative leadership, it does kind of speak about how multiple people can take on a role of authority and an agency within leadership. And so what it is this idea that we're working collective, but there is some interdependence, and with that comes some interdependent work happening across leadership. And if you're familiar with leadership studies, you know, often leadership is talked about as a process, not as a position. So this does take up that element of leadership as a process. So what that means is when we talk about leadership, we're not using it as a synonym for management. So it's not that someone is a leader because they're in that position, but a leadership process of multiple people working together towards a goal of affecting positive and change. If you're familiar with Ikomaves, that idea. So what this is about is we should distribute leadership. If you think about, you know, the word distribute and taking different parts of that process to different people and base it on roles and expertise. Not necessarily formal titles, not necessarily hierarchies, and roles can be very subjective and they can be very fluid. So you might say, well, isn't role the same as a title? But a title can be one thing, but sometimes you need to play a role in a given moment. Maybe it's because of a meeting you're invited to, or because you have a student in front of you. And so that idea of it's not just the title that you wear, but it's whatever context or situation calls for. There's a role that you're being asked to play. And it's very emergent. So like I said, it's not about something that you establish at the beginning. It's based on how the process is going. And so, and then as Tabitha talked about, it's really about that knowledge, expertise, and strength. So what's unique is, like we said, our relationship is, hey, Tabitha, you are an academic advisor, but you have knowledge and experience in the academic world. And I'm an academic, but I have knowledge experience in the advising world. Why would we throw that out? Why would we not recognize that we kind of bridge these worlds and make that kind of a central factor about how we lead? So why would we say, no, this is your title, this is my title? Why wouldn't we say, let's look at ourselves as people and look at the different roles that we can play? So that's what it is generally about. What it looks like in practice is that the authority and decision making is shared across roles. So what this doesn't mean is that I, as the quote unquote academic, am going to make all the authority and decision making. But sure, Tabitha, I'll come to you. And it's not just about like the opposite, where Tabitha, you do the work and you just need me to like sign off. We all have authority and decision making, and it's not that we always need to get the other's approval. It's not that the buck stops at one or the other. It's that we give ourselves the agency. Individually as part of our collective relationship. And like I said, the rules are fluid. So it's not based on like, okay, and every single time that this situation happens, I will be in charge of that. You know, sometimes a student will happen to come to me, a student will happen to come to Tabitha. We're in different spaces at different times. And that's totally fine. We still work within those roles that the situation calls for. There's also kind of that idea of discretion. So as we'll see later, you know, trust is a big part of this, but the idea is that in that role that you are in, you are given that authority, that agency. So you say, okay, I think I can make a decision here, or this is something I'm going to give a little bit of information of, then I'm going to maybe consult with my partner. You know, it's not only about being the decision maker, but also knowing what decisions require kind of further consultation. And this is where it's really important that you have the shared understanding of purpose and boundaries. We'll talk soon about how to establish this, but you know, spoiler alert, it really doesn't work unless there is trust whether you are working towards the same goals, whether you have the same ideas about how this will work. And so I think this is really interesting because if we're looking for some way to maybe give more agency and authority to a role that has maybe been undervalued, this is a great way of giving some shared language to that. And if you think about it, even sometimes language just gives us those mental models. So the idea of, oh, yes, leadership doesn't need to be concentrated, it can actually be distributed. And a big thing that I'll say here, and this is what I was saying, our title is a misnomer, is that it's not synonymous with collaborative leadership. So we use that in the title because it's a more familiar kind of like word. But what we actually want to say is that distributed is not collaborative necessarily in the same way that collaboration is not distributed. I'll give an example of what I mean by this. And I know sometimes this can actually help change people's understanding of this model. Someone can be a very collaborative leader. Someone can say, I will make the executive decision, but I will do so much collaboration and discussion along the way. And so they can be very collaborative. They can do lots of engagement with different, implicated parties. They can meet with people. They can go on listening tours, but then say, ultimately, I will be the decider. I will hold the authority, but don't worry, along that way, I will make sure that I am collaborating before we get there. That's not what this is about because here we are actually democratizing the authority as well. So in distributed leadership, there can be collaboration, of course. We'll talk about, the continuum of joint effort and the ways that it can be quite collaborative, even maybe further than a collaborative leader would take it in terms of integration. But there's also roles or times when someone won't necessarily collaborate in the sense of they'll make a decision there and now, and there's that trust that they can do that. Because of the shared understanding that's been developed. And so in that way, you can say it's quote unquote not collaborative, but it is because the underlying distributed leadership process relies on kind of, that shared collective understanding. So that's what we mean. And so I know this helps reframe for a lot of people because maybe they've been collaborative, but they haven't been distributed. And maybe that's what's actually been nagging at a relationship, the idea that at the end of the day, someone can always be kind of overruled or someone always feels like, oh, although I wish I could just make the decision right now, it would be so simple. I can't because I officially need to get, and even though I know it's just going to be a rubber stamp, I need to do that because we require that kind of like sign off by someone in the unit in the relationship. And so this isn't about changing policy or process, but it's about finding the wiggle room in your working relationship for that.
Great. Thank you, Mitchell. So in an advisor academic relationship context, this distributed leadership helps avoid sort of the two extremes, the one where the advisor is being overruled by the academic, giving no agency, or as Mitchell just mentioned, sort of that rubber stamp where the academic is stepping back and placing all responsibility on the advisor. As I mentioned, and this is my own personal context, working at two different universities, I have had and worked in 5 years with about 6 different program directors. So I've seen sort of, very different ways of going about this, but we'd love to hear from you. So up on your screen, we'd like to see sort of whether you've encountered these extremes. Maybe you've encountered, in the past 10 years, both. You've seen the advisor being overruled by the academic with no agency. Maybe you've seen none. So maybe you're in a position where you haven't seen this and you've got a, relationship that is similar to what we're talking about today. So we'd love to hear a little bit about this.
And this is very interesting like statistics for you. I'm thinking what came
I know.
about do you have a written document and half saying no?
No.
And maybe that's what people are so interested in. Then to say, have you seen these extremes? And the majority, as you'll soon see, are saying yes to both. So I think our inclinations of the structural problems and then how they turn into real life scenarios is really interesting. And all the polls are anonymous. We won't see. So if you know that answer.
Yeah, so almost 90% seeing at least one of these extremes. So definitely significant.
Yeah, so this is really that because I don't think either of these are good. I don't think an advisor wants to be in that position where they're given no agency. And I don't want to speak on behalf of Tabitha, but I can't imagine it's any fun when all the work is on your behalf and you don't feel that there's a partnership here. So if it gives you something helpful to kind of fall back on, this idea of distributed leadership is telling us who leads. Because this, again, it's not necessarily that there is one leader, it is a process and there are multiple roles. But what we're missing is, okay, so if we said we're going to work together and we're going to distribute, how do we actually work together in practice? And so that's when we bring in the continuum of joint effort. So we're only going to give you two frameworks here today, distributed leadership and the continuum of joint effort. And so the previous one is about considering leadership, and this is actually thinking about how to put it into practice. I was introduced to this framework when I started my student affairs work. Because at that point I was working in a position where I had to work with student leaders of student associations. And as you know, in the Canadian context, these are executives of independent associations for the most part. And so it kind of really needs to be about how do we work together, because you don't work under me. We're kind of two separate incorporated organizations working together. This is a framework used a lot in education, in health, a lot of interagency work. And so we've kind of translate it here for a relationship that is not interagency. It's about two individuals in our case, but it's very, very helpful because it kind of helps you to plan, to reflect, to actually give you guidance about thinking about joint effort, and then also to give shared language. So if you're in a position where you're maybe at one of those extremes, or maybe you're new to a role, or you have a new academic starting that you're working with, and you feel like, how do I even like broach this? It's always nice to have frameworks like these, because they can give you that shared language. They are a tool that you can use to actually talk. So if you find it difficult to talk about distributed leadership in practice, this is great for that. And in the next slide, we'll go over what the different levels are in the continuum. But I'll just say now, there is no correct or best position. So just that some people see this and go, oh, collaboration is an ideal. So when we talk about collaboration, we should always look to be collaborative. But if you remember, distributed leadership is not a collaborative leadership. It might require collaboration, but what it means is that the topmost relationship level is not the ideal that you should be looking for in your relationship. And we'll explain actually how that would be quite difficult if all you did was basically like make decisions together and became one. The whole point is that you are interdependent and independent at times. And so just to really point out that there's nothing wrong with being at the beginning of the continuum, as long as you've agreed that's what works best for you, that's great. And now you have shared language. So it's a continuum. It's not a like a ranking of best to worst or anything like that. So here is the levels, and I think you all got access to slides ahead of time, so you should have this available. If you look up continuums of joint effort, and they're also under slightly different names, sometimes the language is a little bit different. This is coming from a variety of sources. But this is kind of a synthesis of some of the most popular language. So the first technical level, if you will, is isolation, where just like nothing is happening between the two of you. We've kind of grayed that out because there technically is no joint effort, so it's kind of off the continuum, if you will. But very technically, that could be something, and maybe that actually gives you language to talk about where you feel you are presently in a relationship. And so maybe it's helpful just to say, there is isolation on this right now. I'd love for us to move towards networking or something like that. And so then you go at least information sharing. So that's the idea of like one way, like I am sending someone a quick update. There is something they need to know. I'm basically not asking for an opinion or whatever. It's kind of a FYI, if you will. And so some relationships need that because someone has made the decision, but they just need to share with you what is happening. Then there's the networking, which is a two-way. So this is where there is information being exchanged a little bit more. Maybe not even like, decisions being made, but this is where, there's at least like a discussion, a conversation. It's not just someone giving an FYI. There's maybe something happening and you just want to make sure that you're both on the same page. So, if you have a meeting together, that's generally when people will chat. Then you get into coordination. So this is where idea of, okay, we're organizing our efforts. So it's a little bit more than we're exchanging. We're just making sure that what one person maybe is planning will work for the other person. It could be as much as like in a temporal sense, like I am planning something. Does this work for your schedule? Or I'm going to go ahead and publish something. Does this work for you? Is this going to be okay? If I send an email today, something like that. So you're just like coordinating to make sure that what one person is about to do is not going to interfere with the other person's like schedule or needs or anything like that. Then there is working in cooperation. We all remember cooperation makes it happen. But in this case, it's actually the more mid-level relationship. And that's where you're actually working together on something, you're cooperating, you're helping. So a great example, thought it's pretty meta, is Tabitha and I put these slides together. We Tabitha did like the first round, and then I went in, and then I put mine, but then I added some, and then she went back in, and so we kind of like worked fairly asynchronously, but we were like developing this like shared resources, and we were doing that cooperatively. When you get into collaboration, that's a little bit more when like there's an actual goal or decision making happens. So the stakes are a little bit higher, if you will. So when it was about making the slide, there wasn't really like big decisions to be made. It was just about let's make sure that your slides work with mine. We're using the same language and tone. Our visuals are similar. We have like a flow. But we kind of like left like your slides you'll be in charge of, and my slides I'll be in charge of, and we'll make sure that they cooperate together. Something like collaboration is, for instance, every year we have to offer different complementary courses in the program that I direct and Tabitha as an advisor for. And so, that's where like we sit down, what didn't we offer before? What should we be offering now? What's our numbers? And we kind of come to that decision together. But it's not just like an information exchange. There's actually some like decision that we need to make by the end. And then there is integration, and this is where you're almost like a united front, I would like to say. And so some example of that is going to be that, if we have a feedback session with like students, we don't go and go, Tabitha's here to speak to advising and I'm here to speak to academics. And so you technically have two people, we usually talk to each other ahead of time and we're like, we're there, we're together. Something they say to like one of us is something they're saying to both of us, and we'll take from there. We're two people, but for all intents and purposes, we're actually there to like represent the program together. So you actually find that there may not be a lot of that, but that's when we're like, we are two people acting as one. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea of the different levels and how they can work in practice and how they kind of give that language for it. And so put together, you have distributed leadership, which is about who has the authority and the responsibility in that shared process. And then with the continuum joint effort, it's how tightly or loosely are you going to work together in any given moment. So knowing that there are people who are taking on roles, now you also have shared language about how we work together once I'm in that role, and how much of the authority am I going to take and how much am I going to collaborate. So it's really nice because if you're someone who likes frameworks and having that shared understanding and language, you now have that. And we thought we won't just tell you about these. We'll give you even more real life examples from us. So we're going to give you a few examples. We're going to go back and forth. And then on your screen, you'll have a poll with 5 questions, and just do it one at a time as they happen. So this first one is a Teams message that I got from Tabitha telling me that our August orientation session can be Wednesday morning or afternoon, Thursday morning for the upcoming year. If I have a preference, let her know. So what would you say that is? You can just answer the question 1. A few more seconds. I know, it feels like a quiz. Don't worry. It's formative assessment for those, just to see if you understand those levels. Okay, I'm gonna stop and we won't even share. We don't want to share. But the majority said coordination, and um, you are correct. Um, so in this case, it's coordination because it's about organizing efforts. So it's not in the sense of collaboration because there wasn't like a big like decision in the sense of like how are we going to offer the orientation? It was really just about like I could otherwise just tell you the date, but I just want to make sure that it's known to you.
Okay, great. And I hope you all know that if I had known we were using this example, I might have been, a little less informal. But this shows, in terms of our communication, there's times for very formal emails, and there's times where we just, want to quickly connect and coordinate something like an event like this. Right. Okay, perfect. So here is a second example. It might be a little small for you, so I'll read it out quickly. It's from Mitchell to myself. Hi, Tabitha. I'm sharing the report Samantha prepared on possible models for a BA Education Honors Program. It was helpful laying out how other McGill programs structure honors pathways and what kind of components tend to be included, and some examples there. That said, still very much an exploratory stage, talking a little bit about feedback there. Looking at determining the eligibility application process and whether we need them to secure a faculty supervisor first. So talking just a little bit about some of the specifics of the of the report that Samantha created, and then happy to discuss further when you've had a chance to look through the report and these ideas. So Mitchell coming to me with this. Also wanted to check in before presenting these ideas more broadly to the department, first discussing the idea with the student executives at the upcoming meeting, and then circulating a short survey. So really just about looking at this report and then looking at some ways that we can get some additional input as well. Anything you wanted to add there, Mitchell?
No, I mean, generally, yeah, we had a report, and I'm asking Tabitha for her insights before we make any decisions, and as we work towards the potential of an honors program. And so people come in. Oh. Well, we'll stop just for time. Tabitha, the majority consensus is collaboration. Are they correct?
They are correct. Yes, wonderful. So the second one was also coordination. So a little bit less, but I mean, we're also talking about events and things like that. So I think it was a little less directed at scheduling those events. But I can see how you came to that conclusion as well. Perfect.
So we have coordination, and then this one collaboration with the idea of where I was giving Tabitha the opportunity to put her own insights into the report. So it wasn't like an information sharing something and saying, hey, there's been a report, we're moving forward, FYI. It was kind of like some work's been done before it goes any further. I would like you to take part. And like if you have your own ideas for this, knowing the goal that we're like working towards. So you could see how this equally is a way that it's still a message from one person to another, but it represents a different kind of type of joint effort. This one, so this is an email from myself to Tabitha. And I wrote, hi, Tabitha. When time permits, can you please take a look at the survey I drafted and add any revisions, comments as you see fit? Now I'll reopen the poll. I didn't realize that I guess when we reopen polls, it clears. Then I would have just done one question instead of one.
Oh, and kept it up. Yeah.
Now I've learned something. So just keep using the first one if you want.
So this is number 3.
I'm combining a few with answering different. Okay. The most people are saying cooperation or collaboration. And again, this is like there's not technically a right answer. When Tabitha and I looked at this, we said this was an example of cooperation, especially knowing this is a little bit more kind of like operational in that we had discussed a survey. I put together a draft. Can you go in, see if there's anything that you want to know? I want to make sure that like we're working together on this. But it wasn't about like actually setting the goals. It was kind of about getting like an actual artifact out in the same way we would have for like the slides for this session. So this is an example of us like cooperating together, but we didn't integrate. We didn't sit together at the same keyboard and type things one by one. I did make the survey and then send it to Tabitha. At the same time, I sent it to students and said, just seeing you so you know this existed. We created space for this, but it wasn't, making sure that I sent it out at a time that worked for Tabitha. There was still room for her to put in her own insights and ideas.
Perfect. So example number 4 in meeting with Mitchell regarding transfer student study plans. I said to him, I counted some of redacted student name credits towards the complementary course requirement. So just sending him that message.
Okay. The results, most people are saying info sharing. Are they
Correct.
not very smart? And a good thing we thought this would be a good slide because a lot of the examples we gave is about like a survey or like on a report, which are very high on the continuum. And this is about something like a student's record and if you could say, an academic decision that was made. And Tabitha was basically saying like, oh, FYI, Mitchell, like I made this and we've like moved on. And that's fine. So this is an example of it's not like, oh, well, when something is about academics, it must be high on the level. It's about situation and context. So I trust that Tabitha made the right decision. And she knows that we have the relationship where she can say something to me like, oh, I already did that. If this was about something, much larger, and as we'll get to, maybe there would have been more discussion. But as Tabitha will talk about, you also need to, in that situation and context, think about what is the implication? Is this like one student and something I need to do? And do I trust? And we've had conversations before about, Tabitha's ability to make those academic decisions. So this is a good kind of example of it's not that the continuum is based on the type of decision being made. It really is about the situation and context that you find it in. And this is an example of an academic authority that was completely done by Tabitha as an advisor and then info shared to me. And there was no problem there with me. And then last but not least, we added this last minute. So if you already got the slides, this is a new one, but we just thought it was funny because we met on Tuesday and we were talking about how we're going to play this. And we said, because we do a lot of presentations together. So I said, so we'll do our usual thing where you have slides that are your slides and I have slides that are my slide, but either of us can step in for the other and nobody will mind. So hope it's that a fun little example of for us. Okay. We got most folks are saying integration, some thinking cooperation. It is integration in our mind. The cooperation would have been kind of first saying, this is your slide, this is my slide, but the integration is then saying, none of that really matters at the end of the day. Like we're okay to jump into each other's parts and B, we don't mind. I have definitely been in presentations where it's kind of like, this is my part, this is your part. And it is like, verboten to maybe like jump into the others, but the idea that we're saying we're going to do this as a united front is showing how we're integrated. And it's funny because it might be like obvious, but even just little facts that we rehearsed ahead of time, we met ahead of time, and we had that conversation about how we're going to approach this is giving that language and making explicit how we're going to work together that some people maybe like don't do or maybe like work in isolation. Thank you for playing with us about the different examples that we literally, as you can see, have like screenshotted from our lives. And so the important thing to take here, and like I said, for the continuum, it's not about always working through integration, because if everything took integration, leadership isn't distributed. It's this like completely unified leadership, which can be very difficult. And why do you even have two different roles? So not everything should be integrated, but then equally not everything should be divided. Otherwise, nothing is shared. So you do want to act at some point within the continuum of leadership, but the idea is anything is fine in terms of if it's something that's been agreed upon and relates to your relationship. And so you kind of need this continuum because without it, you get two failures that are kind of what we spoke about a little bit before in terms of those extremes. So if you don't have this idea, this continuum, or you don't think about the ways that we work together and that we distribute our work and come together, and that distribution should be across a continuum, either everything becomes super collaborative. Like I said, no decision can be made without the other person. What do you do when you have a student in front of you? What do you do if someone's away? What do you do if someone is like slow or to respond? So you don't want to be over integrated, and you don't want to be over separated where everybody acts alone. There's total inconsistency. Maybe there's some like animosity happening there. So really the idea is that what you want to do is you want to shift along that continuum. And we gave you 5 examples of ways that were 5 different examples of how we've worked across that continuum. But everything from like scheduling something to literally deciding on a student's records, we're all like very different to how we do course scheduling and things like that. So really thinking about this, my relationship shouldn't be over integrated, shouldn't be over separated. It should be fluid across that continuum. Hopefully even that's giving you like some language you think that you can bring into your working relationships.
The biggest question, though, when we're talking about this and applying it to your own context is just identifying leads and joint effort in terms of where and how. So these are the main questions that we ask ourselves when we're looking at areas where we can use these practices. Where are there places for a lead within our relationships and the tasks that we do? How do you determine together who is the lead on a specific task or project, or even just something very simple like a course change or something like that? And are there situations where there really is no specific lead? We're maybe looking at integration, or on the other side, something that's completely isolated and it doesn't really fit on the joint of continuum effort. So sort of how are we determining that? Where are these leads happening in certain situations? And like Mitchell has said, there isn't always an exact correct answer, but here are some questions at least that you can begin asking yourself, some things that you can at least begin thinking about when you're trying to put this into your own practice. So in terms of where to identify these leads and joint effort, so thinking about key activities you work on together or that are related to your program. So sort of starting big in terms of key activities that you're doing and then looking at breaking that down. So what are some of the tasks of the activities? So if we're looking at program changes, if we're talking about faculty transfers, what are some of the tasks related to those larger activities that we need to either think about a lead in one area, or perhaps we're working on this and dividing it up or not. It's something we can kind of start with the key activities. You can then place these tasks on the continuum. So the importance of doing this is clearly indicating the relationship level needed. Is it going to be collaboration, consultation, integration? And this is really for transparency and visibility for the program director and the advisor. Excel is really nice and simple, and it's something that you can just keep, something you're running throughout the full year and something that you can keep coming back to. So if there's new key activities that you're going to be working on, key tasks that you're going to be doing together, you can actually write down specifically where you think certain items are needed to be distributed in terms of the leadership there and what tasks you can sort of take ownership of for yourself. And of course, the person you're working with, what they can take ownership for as well. So it's a really nice way to visually have that. We're working on program scheduling right now, and there's some changes that need to be happening, and even just writing my name beside some of these tasks so that it's actually a visual in terms of who's going to be doing what. So holding everyone sort of accountable and having that transparency is really nice. Ideally, in a perfect world, you can work on this for some time with your academic lead and then it becomes sort of second nature. So there's a lot of things that we do now where we don't really even need to talk about it too much in terms of this distributing the leadership because we've had this situation before or a similar situation before, and we had already discussed what would happen in a similar situation. So it's really nice to be able to look back on sort of what we've done in the past, and it gives us a way forward in terms of how we're having somebody take leadership in one area or not. And really, most importantly, review and adjust. So there are some things that I've put on, my plate in terms of a task. And as we're going through, I realize, what, I do need a little bit more collaboration on this. So I'm, connecting with Mitchell to get that done. So, there's always room for, reviewing and adjusting as needed. We also have like a yearly sort of schedule in terms of things that need to be done. So, having that as well is really nice because it's something you can refer back to in terms of your year plan. The years are weird here too because, our year is like September to April, but there's also January to December. So we kind of work with the school year in terms of our tasks as well. So these are just some questions you can ask yourself in terms of distributed leadership and the continuum of joint effort does someone, in terms of the decision making, have more experience or knowledge related to the situation? Mitchell and I have let you know a little bit of our backgrounds, and there are some situations where I do have more experience or knowledge in an academic decision, so I'm able to, make that call and discuss that with Mitchell. And there's areas though where there might be some different types of expertise needed. Something isn't always necessarily going to be only an academic decision. Maybe it involves student success. Maybe it involves more program planning versus like a specific academic decision about one specific course. And most importantly, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, is we're doing this to better not only our own working relationship, but also better the experiences for our students, is just thinking about the impact. So this decision that's being made, this task that's being done, does it affect one student? Or is it affecting many students? Is it one simple routine student issue or something that's come up? The example of me informing Mitchell that I was using complimentary credits towards the student records, or is it something that's a little bit bigger than that? Is it a specific student case where it's very sensitive or students really, this could be applied to every single student in our program. So it's something we need to really think about a little bit bigger. Maybe we need to consult other people. So really thinking about the impact in that sense, even bigger, like in terms of McGill policy, if we can make changes in that way as well, impacting students. Setting a precedent for the program. So like I mentioned, is it a single situation or is it something that's going to affect many students? Something that's going to affect many students. I can't really think of a situation where Mitchell and I wouldn't, discuss sort of that and who's going to take the lead there. And then also thinking about whether it's an academic judgment only or student success pathway or something in between. So it can be difficult to sort of figure out exactly where all of the items that you might be thinking about where you want to lead to come from might fall, but ask yourselves these type of questions, especially when it comes to decision making and impact, are sort of the two ones that you can refer back to when you're trying to decide where to put some of these tasks on the continuum of joint effort as well. And I mentioned, we've mentioned a few things as well with the examples that we've done, but here's just some examples of areas where we have had to really stop and think about where a lead is going to be happening. Is it myself making a decision? Is it Mitchell? Is it something we really have to sit down and integrate and talk through together? We're looking at program changes, course equivalencies, instructor and student communications, and events. And these are things that are happening all year round. And it can be sometimes beneficial to have one person working solely on something, but it can also be beneficial in some situations to be able to have both of us working on something at the same time. So it really depends on the context, the situation, and just seeing where everyone's at in terms of taking on a leadership role, I guess, in that sense.
And I think it's made our relationship stronger, but also the work more fun. Like I'm seeing like the new student orientation, for instance, that's something that's done for different programs. And I know when we were doing it for our program, I had some ideas about like what could happen at that event. And it was a fun like conversation to have. And we did that. And I think it's I don't know, made the event that I'm not just someone who's like invited to come and do my part, but I actually feel like I can speak to that. And I didn't feel like I was, overstepping by saying, oh, I have some ideas of like activities for that. Because ultimately they weren't talking about, how advising was going to happen then. It was just about the event and it felt more maybe collaborative than sometimes it is.
Great question in the chat. Can you talk a little bit more about moments where there may be conflict while working this out? Absolutely. I mean, one thing that definitely comes up sometimes is thinking about the system in which we work. So we talked about sort of the rubber stamp. There are some situations where even though I am pretty much kind of the best person to have the expertise here, the university requires the program director stamp of approval. So sort of navigating that where yes, one person is signing off, but I'm sort of behind that decision and we're sort of having to navigate, it's not conflict necessarily, but it's like we're trying to work through the system in which we exist. And there are certain forms that require certain sign-offs, and sort of working around that to make sure that the person with the expertise is still having a lot of input in that as well. I don't know if you can think of any other examples there, Mitchell.
Well, I was thinking, yeah, I mean, but that would be really too much. Like, yeah, we've had student who needs to do like an independent reading course, and the form requires like my sign off. But the reason they're doing it and they know they'll get credits for it is because they've had a conversation with like Tabitha, and there's no point in that student doing all that work of getting that form together just for me to see it for like the first time. So it is one of those silly things where like Tabitha is probably doing like all the legwork and making sure that I'm the one who needs to sign off. So maybe they'll just be like a little bit of like a heads up of like this is coming your way and here's what like we've talked about and everything. But I feel fine that that's been like discussed already. But no, I can't think of conflict because it kind of does, not that we set this up, but it kind of lends well to the next slide, which is about like what you can do to kind of avoid conflict. And so these are kind of things that have to happen so that you don't get into a conflictual like kind of scenario. So the first is that you have to trust each other. And I know trust is built. It's something that you earn over time. And so this might be something where, at the beginning of a working relationship, you say, let's work further along the continuum. Let's like, for the first times this comes up, let's like collaborate on this, make sure that we have a joint decision making. And once you understand that it's okay, it's like, okay, great. Now that you trust my judgment as well, we can go like further below. So it might be like, I'm going to come to you first. I'm going to tell you what my decision would have been, see if you agree. And if I do that enough, then we can be like, okay, can we stop? I don't need to come to you for kind of like that rubber stamping. That those boundaries are understood. So there's, that's not like it's mine versus ours. So even, I felt like I could, speak to the advising orientation session, even though I'm there to kind of be like a figurehead for the program, and that everything is meant to be like good. So nothing is like, I'm saying this because I think this is like a terrible event or whatever. It's just, I'm excited. I have ideas about it. And when, Tabitha said, by the way, I already gave this student credits, I checked, it seems like it would be okay on my mind. And I went forward. I'm not thinking like, oh, Tabitha must think so little of me, whatever. It's like, oh, great. She was probably prioritizing that student success and having them like move forward expediently. And probably they have registration implications in that decision that needs to be made. That was probably like good. It wasn't about excluding me. It was about making sure that that student was being served. And that, participation is very open. So, I mean, you can see in the emails we send, it's very kind of like, I want to make sure that you have feedback on this as well. Even though it might be something like creating an honors program is an academic decision, and we'll let you know when the advising is needed. It's not like that because the idea is, Tabitha, from the relationship she has with the students, the advising she does probably has great insights. Why would we not have that? So to the question, Crystal, about like, is there conflict? A good part of it is because we built up like a trust and kind of like an implicit understanding with each other about how we'll work together.
We put together some sort of operational practices for maintaining joint effort, and you might be reading some of these and say, perfect, we already do them. Or honestly, even when I was writing some of them down, I was like, it seems like common sense, but it kind of isn't. I feel like I've had lots of experiences so far, so really just maintaining these items with your academic is really important to be able to maintain that joint effort. So standing meetings with clear agendas and action items. So that's between the academic and myself. We have a running yearly agenda that we go through, keeps track of everything. Joint presence at key meetings, joint presence at feedback events. So some of those student events that we were talking about before. And again, when we say joint presence, a lot of times we're doing that in an integrated way, right? So really representing the program together, coming from the same space and understanding of the program and what the needs are. So a lot of times doing that. There are points in meetings sometimes where, yes, that academic lead is needed in some areas, but a lot of times we are attending those with that joint presence together. Dual role in program development surveys, attending academic committee meetings, and that consistent communication and task distribution. So, not only just having these standing meetings, but keeping an open line of communication through email, Teams messages, just making sure that we're always staying open and somewhat available to each other to answer any pressing questions as well, which is really nice.
And we thought we'd ask here, what are ways that you maintain joint effort in your academic advisor working relationship? So what are kind of those practical strategies that actually allow you to come together? Either if there was something that was mentioned or something not, you can feel free to pop it into the chat. Like as Tabitha said, we were like, certainly everyone must have standing meetings, but I think if we were to do a poll, we might find that a lot of people, like I said, are working in isolation. So if you have an idea, feel free to pop it into the chat. To the question in the chat about conflict, there can be conflict, and the relationship can break or fail. So even it's funny because the question came in, we were thinking about like, oh, we should give an example of kind of like where we had a big issue, and luckily there hasn't been like too many, but there was like again, I can't reveal too much, but there's where a student is coming to me with feedback, and it's not quite clear where it's coming from. And then something is happening with Tabitha. So it's just about like, we need to make sure we have that communication, that I'm not making like assumptions because we're each getting like different sides of the story. So, if you're starting a new relationship with either an advisor or an academic, maybe like something actually went terribly. Someone, took the authority and did something and they like shouldn't have. Then things can go wrong. But like we said, this could be something you do at the beginning, or you say, we're going to take a pause. We're going to use actually the continuum. So like in these cases moving forward, what should we do? Like, give me a heads up. Let's do some info sharing, because what happened was that there was a little bit too much isolation. Or you know what? I think we need to move back to some collaboration. It might take a little bit longer, but I promise to be available to you, within 24 hours if you send an email or like message me on Teams, or we'll carve out like 30 minutes every week where we can talk about these, because like something has fallen and then we can get back on track. So we're going to go a little bit more towards collaboration or cooperation, and then we can go back to like networking once we just want to like update each other on things that are happening and have like a quick discussion. So it's not to say that this is perfect. Nothing wrong is ever going to happen. But just to keep in mind, I'm seeing Pearl is coming on. I know we're like getting near the end of our time. So we, unfortunately, I know everybody loves the think, pair, share. We did think about doing this interactive, but these are actually great reflection questions for you to take to yourself. So tap that, you want to talk about them?
Well, I was actually just gonna, before we jump into that, just mention I appreciated some of the comments in the chat. So, the bi-weekly meetings, sort of maintaining that continuum effort. Honestly, yeah, having the office right beside each other is definitely going to help with that collaboration. Mitchell used to be right there, and I'd pop in, all the time. Um, and Tanya, yeah, I appreciate definitely when advisors aren't part of the initial curriculum committee and discussion, then there's issues moving forward. So kind of starting and making sure the advisor's included in that initial dissection, so you're not having to deal with sort of the downfall of that afterwards. Perfect. Yeah, so we've got just like one more minute here. So just if you have wanted to answer any one of these questions, so what leadership roles do you tend to take on? When did they show up? What drives you to take them on? Do they feel purposely distributed? Have these roles stayed the same or shifted over time? What has influenced that? And maybe my favorite question, looking ahead, what would you like to move to certain situations, tasks? Sorry, where would you like to move certain situation and tasks along the continuum of joint effort? What's motivating that shift? How could you make that move? So any of these questions, if you have any sort of last minute thoughts on those, feel free to write them in the chat as well. Yes, they did move him.
And I'm putting them in the chat. You can take a screenshot. The slides were sent ahead of time. So like I said, these are great. These are actually great think pair shares with the academic advisor. If you have like a two or multiple people relationship with your colleagues, if you want to like talk about yourself or just like a trusted peer, or just like I said, for self-reflection. So and thank you, Tanya, for the comment. And Pro, we have like one last slide. These are the key takeaways. So if you got nothing else from this slide, or you had joined us, turned your video off, and then went into another room, and you came back for this last second, these are things to take with you, is think about how you can distribute your leadership. And again, it presents a different mental model than how you can collaborate. How can you distribute, which might involve collaboration at times, but might not. Think about how those roles come together and where you might need to shift. So maybe you're unhappy with something, you want less integration, more integration. Hopefully you have that shared language. So it's not about what to do in the moment or whether to work together. The question is, what kind of joint effort does or could this situation call for? That's a great question. So if you do have that distributed leadership, if you have that authority, it's not about what should I do because you have the authority. It's how much do I need to now work on that continuum? What do I need to do? To give examples, Tabitha could have just scheduled that orientation meeting without me. Like she has that authority. I wouldn't have been able to say anything, but she decided, you know what, this involves a little bit of like coordination. I could have sent out the survey without her, but I decided that involves some joint effort as well. So the big question, and you can even like take this in your meeting, what kind of joint effort does this situation call for? And we kind of don't have time for questions or other takeaways, but some great takeaways are actually happening in the chats, which is excellent. And we are going to put our emails in case you want to talk with us or pick our brains, or we can do it to make it meta. You can talk to us together individually because we distribute our leadership. Tabitha, anything on your end to wrap up?
No, I just appreciate those remaining comments there. Todd seeing sort of a lot less distribution in their context. So maybe you can take some things away today where maybe you could enact a little change if possible. And Angela, I completely agree. Looking to see more collaboration following continuing with central advising. That's something we're actually talking about right now, sort of that central advising and supports directly in the faculty. So seeing what sort of that central advising, we're looking to a hub sort of model in the future. So that might have some changes as well versus sort of working, solely in our departments right now. You've got central advising, great. Yeah, so definitely great.
Well, Mitchell and Tabitha, I just want to thank you both for a very engaging conversation, looking at the ways that you work collaboratively. I loved the models that you shared, and I can see that folks are really thinking about how they can use that in their work. So I hope folks do reach out and continue the conversations with you, because I think this is really great progressive work that's needed, especially in these relationships between faculty areas and academic advisors. So thank you for your time. Thank you everyone for being here. We do have a short break right now before our next session starts. So I know this room will likely close very soon. And thank you again, and we'll see you at the next session.
Thank you so much.